We're here for a panel about vision of the future, and I chose this title because VR is all about vision, whether it's virtual reality or mixed reality, but also because I wanted to. Oh, has he dropped out? I think he'll come back when he's ready.
He'll be back, yeah.
Yeah. I also thought that it was a fitting title because it's also about what we foresee coming at us and for the future generation. So vision of the future, the idea is that it's the vision for the new generation as well. I know Tom is really passionate about this, right? I was going to ask some questions, but maybe it's a good opportunity, Tom, to ask you about a project that you're very passionate about, which is your learning living rooms. Should we chat about that a little bit?
Yeah, that'd be good. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, please.
Well, as you probably, those of you who attended the meeting on Monday, I discussed the aspects of, started discussing at least the whole idea of what would be our manifesto for VR in education. But I didn't get a chance to finish that talk.
But we're going to have him back. You said 6 p.m. Pacific time on Friday. We're going to finish that talk, or even start it from the beginning. Let's see. Yeah?
Well, I don't know if we have to do it at the beginning. That'd be sort of boring to people who've been there before. But my whole point was to talk a little bit about the journey. Yeah. About my personal journey in virtual reality. Yeah. And in particular, how that relates to education and the wonderful encounters I've had with people like you, Daniel, and with others along the way. And now Anson, even though Anson and I are from the same city, I believe, we now have a chance to meet this way. There you are. Anson is there. Even though Anson, you have a sign above your head that says Gabriel.
Oh, no, he is Gabriel. That. He is Gabriel.
This is Gabriel.
That's Gabriel. He's jumped the other side of you.
Okay, now I'm really confused. Okay. Well, Gabriel is a co-founder of a company called Versus.io, right? And with a colleague of mine by the name of Dan Mapes, an old friend. Right? Right. And you wrote an amazing book too.
Yeah, the Spatial Web, yeah.
Yeah, I wrote one of the commentaries on that. And so these are wonderful people that we're able to work with. And that's what's what I love about this occasion, because never before in my life have I seen such a gathering of people from around the world that are interested in this same topic. It's much better than any other conference I've been to, in a way, SIGGRAPH or AWE or any of the others that have gone in the past, IEEE. Because we have all birds of a feather. We have the same thread that brings us together.
Right.
But one of the things that is clear to me is that we think about education being in the schools. And we're trying to make an attempt to do what we can to introduce this amazing technology into the classroom, because we know without a doubt it's extraordinary.
Yes.
It's extraordinary. We know that it works. There's not a question about that anymore. I've been working on this for 54 years, and from day one, when I was working with fighter pilots and developing virtual cockpits, it was amazing how quickly they learned this, because it's intuitive and it unlocks spatial memory. And so this became something that became my passion that I've kept with all these years, not only as a military scientist for 23 years, but also as an academic for another 30 years. And so here we are today. Now, in keeping with this notion of lifelong learning, it's clear that there's another classroom we should be thinking about, and that's the home. The living room becoming a classroom of the future. And I believe that actually it could be the classroom of the future. Because think about it, at least in the Western world, there's more technology than we have in our homes than we'll ever have in our schools. With all of our devices that we have, all of the laptop computers, the desktop computers, the smart TVs, the smartphones, all these kinds of things. And we're going to have more and more bandwidth to the home. and more of these appliances to transport our minds to other places and other times.
Right.
So my one of the things I'm been thinking about is how do we sort of bring a classroom into the home?
Yes.
And the idea is that we don't know. and that nobody really knows yet how VR is going to be used in homes. Ultimately, we have some ideas with playing games and things like that, but we have no idea really where it's going to lead. So one of the things I want to do through the Virtual World Society is to start a basically a learning living room, and to build what I called field laboratories throughout the world. My dream is to have 1,000 families around the world who have technology in their homes that allow them to learn as a family. Now, if you believe the New York Times articles have talked about the future and what's going to happen with the jobs in the future. And they predict that pretty much half of the jobs, 50% of the jobs that we have today, in another 15, 20 years are going to be gone. So here you have a person who's trained, has gone to university or to vocational training or whatever, and here they're in mid-career, and all of a sudden their jobs disappear. That's going to be the change of the future. That's going to be happening everywhere. Now the question is, how do they get back up to speed? Well, it's not going to happen by going back to the university. It's not going to happen by going off to vocational school. It's going to happen in the home. Right. Because that is going to be the lifelong learning environment for everybody, because we can't stop learning. It's not like when you finish graduating from high school, from college, or wherever, you're going to stop learning. Because things are happening so fast. We're now at that event horizon, the singularity that's been talked about, where things are happening so fast, it's ripping the fabric of
that really ties
civilization.
That really ties in with Gabriel's, I want to call it a concept. It's not a concept. Gabriel's book, The Spatial Web. Is that right? Yes. This quickening, indeed. Gabriel?
Yes, I think that when we flash back to the early 90s, I was a student. I was working with Dan Mapes at Cyber Lab. And that was where I was first introduced to, outside of science fiction narratives, the actual work that Tom and his folks were doing, which came out of the Air Force and then became part of the work at the University of Washington. And just as the World Wide Web was emerging, my vision of it immediately was that it will become 3D. It'll be an immersive web, right?
Okay.
Sort of metaverse narrative we talked about before. Fast forward, from then until now, it's roughly a little under years. And look at the pace of change and acceleration. The computing speed that's occurred with Moore's law, and then the expansion of networks with Metcalfe's law. We can see this radical acceleration from adoption of the internet to the adoption of the mobile, web, which was the smartphone. In 2007, we basically had 0 smartphones. By the time we arrived at 2017, we had 50% of the planet is using smartphones, with more power than took to go to the moon by far. So I think this radical pace of change really prompts this question of what is it that we need to learn? What are we educating for in the 21st century? And I think, Tom,
good
my point there was it used to be an industrial model where we're trying to teach people to learn to get a particular type of job, to act in the world a certain way. So I lifelong learning model that Tom's talking about. And I think beyond the education in the home, the notion of the spatial web kind of says that education is everywhere you go all the time, or the opportunity to learn is you're immersed in it constantly. Any object, any person, any environment could suddenly teach you about it. And so I think it causes us to reconsider what we mean by education in the 21st century. And that's what's exciting about this event for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a very good point about what are we educating our kids for. I'm a father. Many of you probably here are parents. My son is 11 years old, and I'm not happy with the education he's getting. He's at a fairly good school, but I feel it's holding him back a little bit, and I want to expose him to more than he's getting there. And I'm wondering, what is his school actually preparing him for? Is he going to need any of that? Is his work life going to require the skills and the exposures he's getting through the education system at the moment? It's a big
Let me
question.
ask you a question, Daniel.
Yeah.
So your son, your 11-year-old son,
Yeah,
plays with Minecraft.
indeed he does.
He's already a creator. He's
He is.
already a designer.
He
And that's what
absolutely
we
is.
need to tap. We have to tap these passions.
Right.
What happens with our traditional educational system in primary, secondary school, even in tertiary education, is we kill imagination dead.
Yes.
Because we have to teach to these standardized tests and things like that. Teachers are overwhelmed. That's the way they get judged. They have to treat all the kids pretty much as the same. And we know that children don't learn the same way.
Yes.
And so as an adjunct or supplement, even probably the primary place for learning should be in the home for the whole family. And so this is what this is what this learning living room is about, because we don't know what that's going to look like in the future. We want to find out. And the way we find out is looking for emergent behavior. And that emergent behavior happens with 1,000 field laboratories that we spread around the world, where we infuse the technology into these homes, along with the opportunity to build their own content and share it, as well as content we gather from a community like this that is used not only for education, but training of various job tasks. We already see it happening in Coursera and with Khan Academy, all these online courses. But these will be virtual. These will be in three-dimensional space. And also, we have a transportation for the senses. So really, the students in the home classroom can go anywhere and to learn. And but at the same time, as I try to predict how's this going to evolve, I don't have a clue, other than we put it in motion. It's sort of like what happened when we started getting high bandwidth internet, what happened when we started getting television in the home, things like that. Really, nobody knew. Let's look at the cell phone.
Tom, can I just for 1 second, can I just ask a question? Is anybody typing in the background? Because a lot of audio is coming through. Maybe we could, Chris, do you hear that as well? I hear a TV in the background and there was some typing. Are we okay?
How do I mute?
So you can mute your microphone, Gabriel, but then you can't talk. Or if you can shut down the background noise, that would. There you go. The keyboard I can hear in the TV.
I don't think I'm near a keyboard, but may not be muted.
Okay.
If I can mute, I can at least tamp down some of the background noise.
Okay, just in between you talking, if you mute yourself, and then we'll unmute you. No problem. Sorry, Tom, I interrupted you.
That's okay.
The microphone is on the right-hand side of the menu.
What I want to do is have these 1,000 field laboratories, different cultures, different perspectives, to explore how they'll use this in the home. Not only for the kids as an ancillary to school, to their school experience, public school experience, but how they will work together as a family, how they'll go on adventures together, how they'll learn about whatever, astrobiology, history, things like that together as a family, so that families learn together. And that with this, we want to have all of the families be able to communicate with each other. So these 1,000 families will be connected to each other and share their stories. And with this, what we want to do is build a documentary. We'll make a full-length documentary film of what happened with this grand experiment of all these families. And then also have a number of scholars and scholarships that will actually study this. It becomes a classroom. So here you have 1,000 families that themselves become a classroom.
Wonderful.
for research and
Tom,
finding what it is. So
I'm
that's
going
what
to
it is.
interrupt you one more time. I'm so sorry, but we have just got Anson in the room. We've just got Anson in
is
here.
here.
Anson, you made it
Okay.
wonderful. If you click your teleporter onto that chair next to Gabriel, you'll jump to the chair, Anson.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Cool.
lovely. If you use
Just
your
hold-
teleporter button,
Hold your
over
teleport
the-
button down,
just
aim at a
right click.
chair, and then release it.
there you go. We
There
have
we go.
Anson in the house, everybody.
Woo!
Fantastic, Anson.
Hi,
Thank you so
Anson.
much
Sorry
for
about
coming.
that.
That's
Yay!
okay. We have the full panel. We made it.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Engage crashed
It's a
on me. Sorry
miracle.
about that.
Did they hold you up at immigration or something?
No.
Lovely. This is wonderful. Okay, Anson. For everybody who doesn't know, Anson is the program manager for Microsoft Education, and he gave a wonderful talk in AltSpace 2 hours ago about mixed reality in the classroom, and he was talking about the immersive reader project. Maybe we'll mention that later. Thank you so much for coming, Anson. We're going to hear Tom talk a little bit more about the learning living room, and then we'll come back to our regular questions that I had prepared. Tom, over to you. Go on. You were talking about your
Thanks,
project.
Daniel.
Yeah. Okay.
You bet. And of course, one of the things we want to do with this experiment is a grand
Yes.
experiment, and will be probably expensive, but we want to have some grand challenges, and these grand challenges would be where we actually offer prizes for organizations and people who want to contribute to the
Fantastic.
content that will be in these rooms.
Fantastic.
The other part of it is that we need to have a community like this
Yes.
that basically is mainstreamed into what's
Yes.
going on. And that's
Yes.
why I want to have a marriage between educators and VR and
And the Virtual
And-
World Society, right?
and the Virtual World Society activity. So
Yes.
this is one of the projects and that I in the VWS that is a dream project for me to do. Now, in the end, I'll go ahead and go to the other piece of this.
Yes.
Ultimately, we want to have 10 million families. That's one
10
of
million
our goals.
families. Let's do this.
10 million families that are participating in the Virtual World Society, sort of like the National Geographic Society.
Yes.
I think the National
yes.
Geographic Society has 14 million or something like that. But
Right.
we
Okay.
want to have 10 million, and each of those families, think about this, each of those families pledge $100 a year
Yes.
to be a member of the subscriber to
Yes.
to this learning living room, and for that they get we have enough resources to take
Learning
our
programs.
community
Yes.
to build the learning programs. So
Absolutely.
multiply 10 million times $100 a year. What do you get?
$1 billion.
$1 billion.
A sweet $1 billion. Yes.
$1 billion a year for the community of developers, content makers, educators to work on putting that content in place.
Yeah.
And not only that, these families are learning together. So we're bringing the world together in this learning process. And so that's the idea, anyhow,
Thank
of
you,
the
Tom.
learning living room. Yes.
Lovely. We're gonna open up to some of the other questions, but just before we do, Tom, just to let everybody know, the Virtual World Society and Educators in VR, we decided to partner up just a week ago because of the huge overlap of what we're doing. And the Educators in VR, we're developing a project called the Borderless Classroom Network. Tom, I think there's so much overlap that the classrooms and schools involved in that and the families involved in that, we can maybe accelerate together. Let's talk
Yes.
about that at some time soon. So
Yes.
I'm gonna just come to one of the questions I had. I want to ask quite a general question now. I'm start off with a general question. So my first question is, and Tom, you have more experience with this than most, but virtual reality, kind of mass adoption of virtual reality, has been predicted a number of times, at least I think 2 or 3 times, when people said, this is it, we're going to have it, it's going to happen. And I wanted to ask each of you, and maybe starting with Anson, and then coming to Gabriel and Tom, do you think now is the time when VR is going to become mass adopted, Anson?
Yeah. Can everyone hear me properly?
Yes.
Yes,
Awesome.
can hear
Yes.
you. Thank you, Anson.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think for us, when we talk about mass adoption, I think it's talking about what specific scenario that we're talking about, either if it's through the consumer segment or through specific industries. I think when you look at a lot in the enterprise and also in education, I think that's when VR is starting to be more mass adopted because of the right scenarios are being created, the right
Yes.
content is there, and the right price point and the right business ROI is there for educators and institutions and enterprises to adopt VR. And I think as we start unraveling more and more interesting and valuable case studies and scenarios that return the right investment for our users, then that's when VR will be mass adopted. And I think we've seen VR used already a lot in film and industry and the medical industry, etc., because of the great ROI we see there.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Gabriel, what do you think? Is this the real thing? Are we in for the long haul now, or is it another false start?
No, I would definitely say this is the beginning of the real thing. It's the challenge that we see from the vantage point of adoption is kind of beyond the usual suspects, which is compute speed and optics and all the sort of hardware requirements, which now you're seeing tens of billions of dollars in research. Outside of AI, there isn't a single other category with as much coordinated effort from the largest companies in the world. It's unprecedented, I believe.
So AI is bigger at the moment still?
Yes.
Okay.
But they're going to connect anyway. So these are just chocolate and peanut butter just meant to go together.
Yeah.
But the thing that's really missing is that word processors were very useful, but web pages became more useful because they became networked. And so the challenge that you have in VR adoption beyond the hardware sides, which we're seeing radical progress in, is fundamentally how do you network between them?
Okay.
If this is a web space instead of a website, how do we go to the next one and the next one and the next one? And so the friction of those challenges have to be solved, and that's a lot of the work that we're doing at Versus. So I think we need a spatial browser that allows us to be able to move between these environments and maintain state and maintain avatars and change them and all this sort of stuff. So I think that's coming.
And does that sounds a lot like WebXR?
Yes, but the problem I see with WebXR is WebXR, in our opinion, is a little like trying to put wings on a car and trying to fly across the country. HTTP is not designed. It's a text-based protocol. It's not a spatial protocol. So we need new protocols like the hyperspace transaction protocol that we've developed that is fundamentally multidimensional and fundamentally spatial and considers those requirements as a default. Like you have to understand aerodynamics in order to build a plane. It's not just about mere transportation, which the car did fairly well, right? So I think there's a shift in thinking, and we're very supportive of all the great work people are doing with WebXR. We think ultimately a new protocol is required in order to really pull this off.
All right. Thank you very much. Tom, what about you? I mean, you've been in the game a long time.
I've been through a few VR winters, if you know what I mean.
Are we going to see another one, Tom?
Well, I think that it's the expectations that bother me. And because it's what happens with overhyping things. I mean, and we as pioneers, inventors, developers tend to do that, right? We tend to overhype and say this is going to solve all the world's problems and things like that. And of course, what happens is we have early adopters who do take up the technology and say, wow, this is really cool. Let me tell you a little story about that. So in 1993, one of my patents was a personal eyewear display. This was something that it was actually on the heels of what was called the Sony Walkman. I don't know if you remember that, but there's a little cassette player that you could walk around with, and you could have your headset on. You could walk around and listen to the recordings. This was a big deal at the time, the Walkman. Of course, that was eventually supplanted by MP3 players and things like that. But one of the things that was clear to me when I transitioned from the Air Force to become an academic is that nobody really knew what a virtual display was.
Yeah.
And so that's what this patent was, a personal eyewear display. It was like these ski goggles that you put on, and you could see through it. You could see the outside world, but you also see in a particular area, what we call an optical multiplex display, you see a 1 meter screen at about 3 meters away.
Yeah.
And this was hooked to a little television receiver that you're wearing on your around your waist, and you could basically sitting on Waikiki Beach and watch the NFL playoffs at the same time. Now, why you'd ever want to do that, I'm not sure, but you could do it. And we thought, wow, this is going to be a big deal. So we took it to the Consumer Electronics Show. People were lined up for 2 hours to see this. This was back in 93, 94 time period.
Yeah.
And people were telling us, wow, you guys are going to be rich. You're going to, this is really sexy, and people are going to love this thing. Well, we ramped up with our funding. We started building these things. We were in a manufacturing mode, had big, full-page advertisements in the New York Times. And then we had a big opening day when people could actually start buying. There's a big hi-fi store in Seattle called Magnolia Hi-Fi, and we had the news crews there, and people lined up again for an hour to get inside the store to try this on because they could actually buy it then. And so they go in and they put it on, and they look through it, look around, see basically the broadcast television or recorded TV, and they said, wow, this is so neat. I've got to have one of these. And then they looked at the price tag. The price tag was $799. And by the way, we weren't making any profit at $799. The components were really sort of clunky, and they weren't that, evolved. And so what happened as a result of that is that people didn't buy it because it cost too much.
Yeah.
And so what happened is back to what my colleagues have been talking about, is that enterprise sort of took over. Yes. Enterprise picked up. This was intended to be a consumer electronics product, but what happened was the dentists started buying these things and using them in their clinics, and then other things started happening. So enterprise picks up on these things and use them because they have the money, and they also have the need. So what this story tells me. Oh no! By the way. There's a whole other part of this story because of those dentists. Because as a result of the dentists using it, we got into pain and using VR for pain. And that launched this whole area where now VR is used as a non-pharmaceutical analgesic for pain and for PTSD and for phobias and all that. We wouldn't have done that if we hadn't tripped over this thing with dentists. So it was important to do it, but we didn't end up where we thought we'd be. So the lessons learned in this is that in the end, there has to be pull. And the pull comes, we've been pushing VR technology for a long time. Now, finally, as my colleagues have mentioned, there may be pull. And we've got to have the pull, the applications, in order to use it, where it really does help people. And it's not just a gimmick. It's not just a gadget that you play with for a while, then don't play with it anymore.
Absolutely. I want to bring Anson in on this because Anson obviously is working with Microsoft here, and Microsoft has however many billion computers around the planet operating. And I know listening to you and your talk earlier, Microsoft is heavily invested in bringing mixed reality to classrooms. Is that right? And kind of merging the existing offering you have into 2D with things like the HoloLens and the immersive reader. Do you see uptake of spatial technologies for via Microsoft offerings at a rate you would like to see? Is it accelerating in a way you're happy with, or is it still slow for you?
Yeah, for me, it's accelerating really quickly, especially in specific domains, like if you talk about in medical, specifically about adopting HoloLens as a way to learn anatomy. Because it's such a cost reducer for the business or for the institution, as well as it makes tremendous learning outcome differences for our students. And I think those are the key scenarios that we need to double down on, is, like I mentioned earlier, is the scenarios that is valuable to both the business as well
Yes.
as our end user. And I think within medical is where we see the largest uptake. And,
Okay.
and in other high risk or expensive domains as well, like such as engineering or manufacturing, are
Right.
two examples of domains and areas in which education can really be transformed with this piece of technology.
Okay, I see. And I wanted to ask you, Gabriel, because I know, or I think I'm correct in saying this, one of the areas with your development around the spatial web is the concern for keeping the web open and free and accessible. Can you tell us a little bit about that? How important is that, and how close are we to doing that?
Well, it's based on the precedent of the World Wide Web really functioning as a global utility, public utility, which is the first of its kind, certainly built on the backbone of the internet. But as an information space, that's unprecedented and remarkable. And but in the beginning, there were lots of folks that thought they would try their own attempts to kind of create a walled garden. You had AOL, you had Prodigy and CompuServe.
Yeah.
So a lot of what we're seeing in the AR space, the VR space tends to sort of try to expand out from the gaming environment. And the AR starts from a different direction with the notion of the AR clouds. But there isn't any underlying common standard for communication between these things, and without it's very difficult to ensure any sort of openness. So if people develop their own protocol standards at the heart of it, then we'll really miss out. So we launched the Spatial Web Foundation, and we will be ensuring that the core protocols that we're developing are designed for to be open standards. We're working with the IEEE and other groups around the world to ensure that. So we think that's the next largest public utility, for humanity is going to be the next iteration of the web, which is really a spatial web, which moves from an information space to interaction spaces.
Yeah.
And so there are then much deeper questions and concerns around biometric data and privacy and security, which have to be considered, which also were lacking in the original web architecture. So I think both open, but what we call our TIPS framework, which is trusted, interoperable, private, and secure. Where you can get those benefits at scale, but you can still maintain, sort of the civil liberties that we count on.
Okay. All right. I want to ask another different question, and that is, you hear a lot of talk about, I hear a lot of talk about people saying, what's the killer app of VR? And I know what they're asking because we waited for that with the World Wide Web. And I think everybody here remembers having their very first email. That seemed to be kind of a thing that everybody understood and was functional and useful, and became adopted very quickly. The term killer app is maybe the best. Maybe we can come up with do you have a killer app, and if so, what do you think it is? I have my own opinion, and I'll tell you that in a minute. But Tom, what do you think we have a killer app for immersive technology, for spatial technology yet?
I have always had one, I believe.
What's
and
that?
that killer app is education and training. It has always been the case. And the problem is, at least with education, there's no money. And that's what's been hindering this all along. Certainly, there are many, and back to the training thing, as we talked about this learning living room, that's going to be important. But for simulation to train, especially in medicine, it's huge, because we have this problem is that we don't have enough medical professionals to take care of the world, and especially the allied healthcare personnel. And they could, 90% of what they can do or learn to do can be done in VR. And at a much lower cost. And if we can ever show the economics of it, that how much money could be saved going to VR. Let's take, for example, just a university.
Yeah.
Okay, the University of Washington, a major university in the USA. And over a 24-hour a day period, we have all these huge buildings and these huge lecture halls.
Yeah.
And so what happens is that if you look over a 24-hour day, most of the time they're empty.
Yeah.
So you have 200 students in those lecture halls, maybe a few times a day. But you have to heat them, you have to build them, heat them, air condition them, whatever. Not too much air conditioning in Seattle. But nevertheless, that's what happens. And so what a waste. Furthermore, we build a city every day. 50,000 people show up from, a few to 50,000, and they go back home again.
Yeah.
Now, they show up at school, those kids go in that classroom, and the guy stands in front with a PowerPoint slide and gives them a lecture. Yeah,
right.
still.
30-year-old
really?
strategy.
Yeah, really. I mean, so that doesn't have to, you don't have to move the body to move bits. And now, what should those buildings be used for? They should be full of laboratories. They should be full of things that you won't have in your home.
Yes.
And the students, you want the students together to work together in groups, certainly in those laboratories. But what a waste of money. And we're still doing it. And
so
when a student graduates from the University of Washington with $100,000 in debt from student loans, that is broken.
How many headsets could you buy for $100,000, right? All right. So for you, the killer app, Tom, is education. I want to pass it on to Anson and then Gabriel. Anson, for you, is there a killer app? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, I think that the killer app is something that we talked a lot about inside this VR space. But I think that there's killer apps for specific scenarios that we talk about. Like going back to my previous point on anatomy, I think that's a killer app on how students learn anatomy inside the classes. For example, at Case Western, every single medical student now is using the HoloLens to learn anatomy within the class.
Wow.
Right. And that's the way that this application has transformed how students are learning anatomy and how they perceive and understand the world. Yeah. And when you talk about killer application, I really believe it's applications that allow a educator to create is where we'll see more success. Where it's just not one of those static experiences where you're able to sit and go through an experience from step A to step C. It's one that actually allows a student to experiment, explore, as well as to create.
Okay. So it sounds like for you, it's the killer app, if there is one, is still in education. Do you say? What about
100%?
100%.
Go ahead.
Go. Go.
Yeah. And for example, if you look at a lot of the killer apps that we're creating, at least the apps that we're creating at Microsoft, a lot of them are focused on cross-domain, fundamental apps that I believe that are needed in AR and VR. So let me give you an example of that. So for example, Microsoft, the Dynamics 365 guides is a way where you can augment digital instructions onto real life objects.
Yeah.
And also I almost call it like the PowerPoint for AR and VR. Through a simple PowerPoint like interface on the PC.
Yeah.
A creator can create any content, and then anyone can be using those set of instructions to teach a specific procedural process.
Okay.
And the reason why I believe that's a killer app is it's a simple to get concept. It allows the users to create whatever content they need.
Yeah.
It's very easy to measure the ROI and the business value and the user value of this experience. But
okay.
I echo what Tom said. It's focused on training and education is I think where the biggest apps will be.
Thank you, Anson. How about you, Gabriel? Do we have a killer app yet? Is it education, or do you see it as something else?
Well, I gotta admit, I feel a little bit of pressure now.
We're all friends here. Hey, Gabriel, say
That's
what you
right.
need to, my friend.
Sitting inside of on the moon and the educators and VR conference.
It's not a loaded question at all.
So I think I have to agree with my colleagues as well, which is at the most basic level, the shift that I see has to do with the difference, which is kind of the difference that makes a difference, right? Which is the difference between information and experiential based learning or training, right? And so suddenly that capability, which I personally wouldn't, I don't, the killer app narrative I find to be sort of it's not a fan of the term. I actually don't know what, like, if you look at the World Wide Web, did you say the killer app was websites? Was TCP/IP? Was it email? Maybe. In Web 2.0, is it social media or is it video? I think if you look at the trend, it's really about information sharing at higher and higher levels of fidelity that are more similar to the multisensory way that we cognize the world. It's embodied cognition. It's not just words on pages or text-based information. So I think that's an evolutionary arc in a species trying to learn to communicate with itself, share its ideas, its visions, its capabilities, capacities. Anson, I'm a huge fan of the stuff you guys are doing with slides at Microsoft. I think this is, to me, this is still one of the most staggering features in the world, where you can take a digital twin of an entire process of assembling something or maintaining or repairing something and project it right onto the object itself, and then have it walk you through. That's not text-based instruction. No. That's not words.
It's an experience.
So it's an experience. And so I think experience is that defines the era of the spatial web, whether it's in VR, AR, or whatever you like to call it. But the reason for that is that it's just more natural, intuitive to our biology. And so this is an inevitable. We're inevitably arriving here. It doesn't feel like it's something that the market is doing. It's something evolution is doing.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. Now, in the time that I've been, you guys have been in this space for a long time. Shall I tell you how long I've been involved in VR? 20 months. Sure. That's it. I put my first VR headset on 20 months ago, and
you picked the right time to begin.
Absolutely. Right. It was 3 weeks before the Oculus Go released, and I feel like I strapped into a Formula One race car and just no looking back. But I realized when I first came across the idea of spatial computing, at one point I was looking at my son playing Minecraft, like you were saying, Tom, earlier. Kids are spatial natives. That's the way I see it. I look at them, and we half of education is teaching them to deal with abstractions of information or experience through a book or reading or this or that. If we can give them the direct experience, that their minds are spatial learning organs, and it seems like the technology is catching up to be able to educate this new generation of spatial learners in the way that they want to learn, but it's almost as if our education system has gotten in the way. Do we need a spatial curriculum? This is something I've been thinking about. Do we need to develop a spatial curriculum that allows trainers, teachers, educators to develop the professional skills to integrate this into the classroom to catch up with our spatial generation? Tom, what do you think?
Absolutely. I think that with this new paradigm shift of spatial learning, with the ability to form these places in your mind, this is something that teachers aren't really aware of. I mean, they know about imagination. And certainly, and they know about different pedagogical principles, constructivism, things like that. But we're talking about something that's entirely new in terms of the ability to put these places inside of the kids. Now, I say it's entirely new. It isn't really, in a way, because let me tell you a story. another story, if you don't mind. So I was I was asked by the University of Washington, my dean of the College of Engineering, to travel over to Eastern Washington to give a talk to the Washington Tree Fruit Growers Association.
Okay.
Now, here I am, an engineering, guy, and working on VR. And I asked him, "You really? What in the world would tree growers have to interest in what I'm doing?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, just go talk to them about what you're doing and about virtual cockpits and things like that." And I said, "Okay." So I went over to the eastern part of the state, and I was giving this talk. About 3,000 people in this audience. There are a lot of tree fruit growers in Washington State. So, so at the end of my talk, I talked about the educational implications of this and design and medicine and all that. And after I finished, all of these parents came up and were surrounding me. And and universally they asked, "Well, what should we get our kids to study? What should they learn to be in this new era that's going to happen in this virtual reality space and things like that? How are they going to do that?" And I thought about this for a minute, and I said, the best thing you can do for your children is to get them to read the classics.
Yeah. All right.
Because there are millions of virtual worlds already out there.
Yes.
In imagination.
Yes.
And what we don't want to do with VR is kill imagination.
Very true.
We have to build upon that. And how do you put places into kids that goes along with their imagination to help them basically become these innovators of the future and teachers of the future, all of this. We've got to figure out how to do that. It's back to your original question. Should we be teaching this? I think yes. And I think we need to be understanding it first.
Yes, but very true.
But VR does not take the place of reading, doesn't take the place of going physically out in the world and hugging trees and things like that.
I agree.
So it is a device. It is a tool. And it's a tool that we can use to help advance our civilization.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you.
But it's not just the hardware technology. It's the whole system that we need to put together for that to happen.
Thank you so much. Now, I've just realized I've lost track of time a little bit because I am so engrossed listening to the three of you. I could go on for a long, long time. I think I don't want to hold you up. I think one or two of you have to get to another meeting. I'm aware of that. And I'm also aware I don't want to hold up the audience here who've made the long trip from planet Earth to the moon to listen to you speak. I regret we don't have more time. I am going to call time now. But I just want to thank you so much. Anson, I'm really, really glad you finally made it to join us.
Yes.
It's okay.
I thought the panel started at 2:00, not 1:30.
There you go. There you go. So yeah, we had you in Altspace a little bit earlier. Gabriel, fantastic to meet you. Everybody, Gabriel is also giving another talk. That's right, isn't it?
Yes, on Friday. I'll be giving a whole talk on the spatial web.
Right, and that will be here in Engage. Is that correct as well, I think?
That's correct.
Wonderful. So we're going to be back here on Friday. Tom is going to be back on Friday as well to share about your manifesto, the VR manifesto, the learning manifesto. So we have more in store from these wonderful guests. I want to say a huge thank you to Chris and to Mike from Engage VR for helping us out, to David Dermott, who built this stage, to David Whelan for supporting us. Thank you to you all for coming. And I'm just super excited. I'm lost for words about how well this virtual conference has gone and is going. I didn't have a clear idea of what it would be, but now we're in the middle of it. I am super excited, and I'm sure we're going to do more in this space. Tom, lovely to see you. See you around soon. Gabriel, wonderful to meet you. See you soon. Anson, I'll be in touch. Thank you very much, everybody. All right.
Unmuted everybody for an applause. Thank you.
Hang out. Oh, Chris, should we take a selfie? Can we take a quick selfie? Can we do that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me come grab some pics here of you guys.
Right. We'll take some
Awesome.
pictures of all of us. I'm going to go sit on this chair quickly. My friend Tom.
Yes.
Oh, that's great. Beautiful.
Yeah. Excellent.
Awesome.
All right.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you, everybody. Feel free to stay and
everyone.
mingle and chill if you want. I'm going to have to go myself because I'm back into Altspace recording some more sessions there. Thank you for coming. Safe trip home to planet Earth. All right,
Thank you very
Chris.
much, Gabriel.
I can hang
If I
on
go,
for a few
Chris,
minutes.